Hey everybody, my name is Chris. This is one in a series of videos in which we will be covering the entire GA4 construction process all the way from tracking code placement to dashboard creation. We're doing this for Maui Humane Society in exchange for my services on this project. They've been kind enough to allow me to share this and other tutorials with you. So this one we're going to talk about Google Tag Manager custom event tag creation. We're going to do some advanced level tagging. So if you're new to Google Tag Manager or GA4, there's two videos earlier in this series in which we talk about some beginner level tracking tags. So there's a separate video there, and there's another video in which we just do some intermediary. This one we're going to ratchet the difficulty level all the way up. These are pretty difficult, and so you might dig these if you are like to work with Google Tag Manager or just learning more about this tool and how it works with GA4. Okay, so there's going to be two, and that's going to take just a decent amount of time. So for all of this, we kind of go by the principle that if we don't write it down, it does not exist. And so this link right here is going to redirect you to a Google Sheet where all the different tags are documented, and you can see the audit process. We created a wish list for Maui Humane Society for all the different custom events they wanted to track, and that wish list then transferred into a schema for all the different events that we want to track and exactly how we're going to be tracking them with Google Tag Manager. Now, you won't be able to edit this document. It's kind of locked down for obvious reasons, but you can take a look. And if you want to utilize your own document, you can find one here. I've got a template for you that you can find at this URL. It's a blank template, so you can copy it and utilize it for your own projects, for your own clients, whatever you want to do. And again, for all of this, we're abiding by the idea that if we do not write it down, it doesn't exist. So let's check out that document real quick. So here she is. And again, there's an audit section of this, which we covered in a previous video. We actually created a wish list of all the different behaviors custom to or specific to Maui Humane Society that they want to track on their website. Now for this one, we are tracking two behaviors. One you're looking at right now. It is this slider card. And so there's a number of different sliders in here that they want to be able to track. So to track any learn more button here, that's not the hard part. The hard part and why this is advanced is that they don't want to necessarily track the learn more button, because if you look at every one of these sliders, they're kind of similar. Some say learn more. We've got another learn more, so we can't really be specific. We want to track this header right here. So where it says save the fire cats, or where it says $0 adoptions this month, we want to know which card or which slider they are selecting. Okay, so that's where it gets a little tricky. And to do this, what we're going to be doing is building a variable in GTM called, that I'm calling at least, the parent-child variable. So if you go to Google and you search for GTM help, you will find, just like I did, some script that you can utilize, right? And so this script will help you establish a parent-child relationship between elements on a page. What do I mean by that? Well, let me show you an example. So on this slider here, right here, let's take a look at this one. So here you have a parent. Everything inside this box is going to be housed inside the parent element. Now this parent has children, right? So there's a child within the parent, there's a child within the parent, and the one child that we really care about is this headline right here, okay? So we first need to establish a parent-child relationship with this element on the page. So for every single parent-child element, and this comes into play all the time with e-commerce, where we have a kind of a card layout or a slider, or if you have a button, you want to grab the product name or the service name, whatever it is. This comes into play all the time. I utilize this parent-child element for pretty much all of my clients that I work with, right? And Maui Humane Society is no different. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, this is going to be gross. Here we go. Script. Okay, so I will provide this for you in a text file so you can easily scrape it, but I just wanted to show you what this looks like in all of its glory. This is just a variable, okay? It's going to live inside Google Tag Manager. If we go back to GTM real quick, you'll see that there is a variable. Let's go here. And it's a user-defined variable. There's all kinds of variables in here, but here it is right here, JS parent-child. You can call it whatever you want. I call it JS because it's a custom JavaScript. You can call it CJS, whatever you like. Just have a good naming convention here, like I've tried to provide. And there's that script, the same thing you just saw in this slide. Not different. Now that's gonna sit there. And all this thing does is it's going to establish a parent-child relationship between elements on a page. Again, we've got parent, and then we've got children inside that parent. So anytime you've got a slider or a card on your website, you can utilize this. The other one that we prepared for this one is going to be called, let me back up here, and I've put it together already. I've got home slider object. And again, try and give these a name so they have meaning, but also if we do not write it down, it doesn't exist. So here's the event that we're going to create. It's going to be when a visitor clicks a CTA button on homepage sliders. Let me zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. And we're going to call this event home slider CTA. Now, this variable right here, home slider object, is right here. Okay. We are writing everything down. So if you scroll down, and you'll have access to this document, you'll find a whole list of variables. There's all kinds of tags in here. A whole list of variables. You can see home slider object. It returns a label for home sliders. What kind of variable is it? Oh, it's a custom JavaScript variable. And then we've got a parent, which is MS slide content, and a child, H2. What does that mean? So on our variable, for some parent-child variable that you can create, again, I call mine home slider object up here, but you can call yours whatever you want. Here is the script in all its glory for what we would utilize for every time we establish or we want to define a child within a parent. Okay, so to do this, we must provide some CSS, some style, a class, an ID, something in this that says, here's our parent and here's our child. And when you identify what the child is, and again, we are not, for this example, pulling the button. We want to get this guy right here. So we're going to look at the script. Be not afraid. If we look at this real close, it might be somewhat difficult to see. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So that's what we want to gather. We want to gather what's inside that H2 right there. Okay, same thing for the 0 adoptions, right? So it's also in an H2. And the whole thing is captured inside this div right here. And the div is the parent, right? And if you look right here, there's a little class called MHS slide content. Now, your class in your cards or sliders or whatever you're doing will be different, right? So don't expect to see the same thing here. But what you want to do is kind of do a little bit of investigative journalism and figure out what is the parent element and what is the child element. And so in our documentation, I've said the parent element is going to be this class and the child element is going to be this right here, this H2. So if we look at this, we can see the class is, there's our parent, and there's our child. You just kind of have to know where to update this script, okay? And so this slide here will kind of identify with bold where we're going to update that. And again, I will give you a separate file that'll look something like this. So you can get both the parent-child element and the specific variable. So you don't need to see that in all its glory, but that's the idea, okay? So again, we do this all because the client really wants to know which card are they selecting. And we can probably pull like card number 1, card number 2, but that's not very descriptive. It's not very helpful when you're putting a report together and when you want to see which of these cards is most popular amongst those that are clicked on, okay? So here's how we're going to do this. If we go back to our documentation, scroll up to this particular event, which again, we're going to call the home slider CTA, call to action. This is the event, and we're going to gather parameters. If you haven't seen a previous video from me, the metaphor that I make is that events are like cakes, parameters are decorations. So here's a cupcake, here's sprinkles and frosting and fondant or whatever, okay? So here we are. We are going to create this now. So the first thing that I typically do, you can, in Google Tag Manager, go right to tags and start to build the tag out. I prefer, this is just my personal preference, to build the trigger first. Okay, so we're going to build a trigger. And this is going to be just a link click. Now in our documentation, all the way to the right, this is a big sheet, we've got trigger details for every single tag we've got. So again, we've got the tag name, a description of what we're tracking, the event name, our decorations for that cake, and then trigger type and detail. The trigger on this one is a link click. So let's go find that. Here's all our different triggers. And there's our link click right there. Now, if I just say this right now, it's going to fire on every single link click. I don't want that. I want to fire it on just some, in which the click element matches CSS. And again, I've written this down right here. Okay, so what this is saying is when there is an anchor or when there's a link that has anything inside that wrapper, it's going to track that. So anything, any click in here, we're going to get. Now, the way I got that is I right-clicked, I inspected, and I kind of cheat because I utilize this Chrome extension called the CSS Selector Helper. I'll include it in the notes, but when I select certain elements, I can see which of these items are going to be highlighted. And so you can see it's highlighting all these different elements. I'll include this. I won't go into detail here because at a previous video I talk about this particular Chrome extension that I've got, but you can add it at any point. Again, I'll include a link to it in this video description. But that should do it. There's my trigger. And now it's time to build out the tag. Okay, so I'm going to go to tags, hit new. And the beautiful thing about writing this down in advance is that you can just kind of copy and paste. It's not that hard. I'm going to put this in the GA4 folder. Let's go grab our trigger. Slider, there she is right there. Tag configuration, this is a Google Analytics 4 tag. And so we want to send this detail and this data over to GA4. And to do that, we have to identify our measurement ID. Now, previously, I don't want to write down the specific measurement ID, so I always create a little variable, just a constant variable called GA4 measurement ID. Just saves me some time so I don't have to remember what the actual web stream is, which is right up here, right? But I just create a variable with that constant value in there, so that saves me a little bit of time, especially when you're doing dozens of tags. So there's our event name. We'll pop that in there too. And I think we've got 3 decorations or 3 parameters here. 1, 2, 3. We're going to do link text to see what they are clicking on. Is it learn more? Is it, adopt today? Let me refresh this page. That slider's getting wonky. Is it learn more? Is it learn more? Is it adopt today? What's the text? So that's one item. Okay. So we'll get that. And that's just going to be click text variable. And then for the object, and this is just a custom parameter I'm just coming up with because I want to find out I could call this like homepage slider title, but I would only use that particular parameter for the homepage slider. So sometimes it's helpful to kind of find kind of a more broad definition of objects or categories that you might select, right? And for this, I'm going to pop in our JS homepage slider object. I'm going to do the same thing actually here. Now you might ask yourself, Chris, why are you capturing this in object and in category? I want to give my client options. Okay, so I want to give them some options in terms of when they're producing a report and they can't remember which specific parameter to utilize. They can kind of pick and choose, right? So if I got options, I can sort by category, as in which category of slider did they select? Was it this object, right? So I can kind of give them a couple options there. You don't have to do that, but I just choose to give a little bit of wiggle room. Let's save that. And now anytime we add a new tag or trigger or a number of tags and triggers, if you want to load up a bunch at once, let's preview. When we preview, it's going to open up one tab in Chrome, and I can choose what page I want to look at. There's my home page. And then it'll open up another tab that will be the live website. Okay, and the reason I know that it's being previewed is I've got this little tag assistant bug right here, and there's the blue diamond. There's the blue diamond, right? So now, moment of truth, let's click on the fire response efforts. Now I should have, this is my link text, and this fire response efforts as my category and object. Say a little prayer. There was a link click right there. Ooh, there's a tag right there. Let's see if we got it. We sure did. All right, just to be sure, let's do another one, just to make sure it worked. I'm going to go to a different slider, and now we're going to let's do the $0 one. Yeah, $0 adoptions this month. So if I hit adopt today, this should be my text, and the object and category should be $0 adoptions this month. So there we go. Let's see if we got it. There's a link click. It's thinking still. It's still going to go to this adopt today page. That's fine, it can think. And yeah, we got it. So that one is good. Now I'm going to mark this as completed. We're just going to put it a different color. And now we're going to move on to the next one. So we've got one advanced tag down. Okay, this next one's going to be interesting. Not that the one previous wasn't interesting, but this one's adopt pet details. What is this? Visitor clicks to view more details for an adopt pet. Well, what that means is if I go to the adopt section, actually I'm here. Here we are. We're on the adopt section. That slider must have taken me there. That's beautiful. Okay, so now if I want to view one of these animals that is available for adoption. Let me filter to dogs. Let's get a dog. And if we find a good one here, I mean, there's so many. Which one do we want to do? Oh, Delilah for sure. So when I click on Delilah, this card shows up, okay? Now what I really want to do here is measure every time this is visible when it shows up, okay? And so again, visitor clicks to view more details for an adopt pet. Now, if I close Delilah for a second, Delilah will be right back, stay right there. If I click this, I can probably get Delilah's name, I can probably get the breed, I can do the same kind of parent-child thing that we had before. That's fine. I'm going to go about this a different way though. Okay, so when I click this, what happens is this modal shows up. And this modal probably has some kind of, yeah, there it is right there, the MCI modal card. Again, you got to do a little bit of homework and kind of be comfortable enough with the code. I'm a marketing guy, I'm not a developer, but as a marketing person who wants to create his own tags, you kind of have to get somewhat familiar with code, and you just need to know enough to be dangerous. And so this looks like something that would show or become visible every time a card appears, right? Now, if we look further, if we want to gather elements like, all right, we're going to get it when it shows up, and the trigger we're going to utilize, by the way, is going to be called element visibility. We'll talk about that in a second, but essentially what it does is when something becomes visible, you can fire this thing, or you can utilize this trigger. This is often really helpful, by the way, whenever you've been to a form where the thank you message just appears. Like you don't go to a thank you page upon submission of the form, it just says thank you, like just below the form. This one's gold. You can use it all the time. So you might want to check that out for lead gen forms where the visitor does not get redirected to a thank you page. But when that modal card appears, we're going to fire that thing, okay? So the other things we want to do, let's look at our decorations here. Here's our event name. Someone is viewing the adopt pet detail, right? We've got other different adopt pet events down here, which we've already done. We're not going to cover these, but just so you know, you can see the naming convention here. All these other events are going to track when people share this on Facebook, share it on Twitter, share it via email. So when we look at Delilah and I want to share it on Facebook and share her on Twitter, hey, look at my new dog, print a picture of Delilah, whatever I want to do, all of these actions here are covered with these events. So if you're interested in that, check out these triggers and event detail. You can knock yourself out. But for this one, we're going to gather what page we're on. We also want to gather Delilah's species, as in is she a dog, a cat, and her pet ID. You know what? Let's also get her name since we're here. So we're going to get her name, and then we're going to get her ID, and we're going to get her the species. Now, why would we want to gather these things? Anytime, because we've got dozens of animals that are available for adoption, we will want to sort, not just to see how many times someone viewed an animal, but how many times somebody viewed cats versus dogs. Or if we gather Delilah's ID, that's probably easier to identify an animal by ID for the folks at Maui Humane Society than it is like Delilah. There's probably a few Delilahs out there, right? But there's only one 548490099. Okay, so we're going to gather these things. And what we've done here is we have placed JavaScript variables to gather these items. So again, we want to scrape this. The rule in GTM is if you can see it, you can scrape it. And what I mean by that is if you can see it on the page, there's probably some CSS elements that you can utilize to gather all the detail you want, okay? And so I'm not going to go too in depth there, but just know that this pet species, pet ID, these JS JavaScript elements, they are also, if we don't write it down, it doesn't exist. They're also documented here. We got name too while we're at it, okay? So let's do this. Let's create this tag. Actually, we're gonna create a trigger first. So let's go triggers. We're gonna do this element visibility trigger. Let's make a new trigger. Again, write it down first because it becomes so easy to do this properly. So typically my process is write everything down in a Google Sheet or some kind of Excel first, and then I go about putting it all together because it kind of helps me structure what I want to name things, what the naming convention should be, and so on. So the trigger type here is element visibility. Let's go find that thing. Not any of the page view events, not click. It's not form. Oh, there she is right there, element visibility. Now here's the deal. When something becomes visible, we can fire this trigger. We typically use CSS elements. And what we're looking at here is if we go back to Delilah, it looks like that card. See, the whole card shows up when this MCI modal card class appears. So I've written it down, but we're gonna go get it. Classes, by the way, typically are preceded by a dot when you do CSS selectors, which is why you see the dot right there. If it were an ID, it would look like that, but that's inside baseball a little bit. I want to do this for every element. So if I look at Delilah, or if I look at Duke, or Bessie, or Olaf, any other dog on the page, I want this to fire every single time someone opens up a modal card, or a dog card, or a cat card, or whatever. So this is not once per page, but it's once per element. We'll observe DOM changes. And then the other thing I'm going to do is that there are similar cards, just so you guys know, there's similar cards on the lost and found page. So we kind of have to classify, this is only because this is the adopt pet details event right here. This is only going to be happening, we only want this to fire when I'm on page path contains pet adoption, pets for adoption, right? So my little nomenclature in here is that there's a double ampersand. That means it's a multi-condition trigger. There's more than one condition. So for this one, we want this CSS selector, and then we want not every visibility element, but some in which the page path contains the pet adoption page path. Okay, so you all know the page path is, here's our host name, everything after the .org or .com or whatever kind of website you're using is the page path. Okay, so when page path contains that value, we should be good. All right, so let's hit save. Now it's tag time. And again, we want to gather a few different decorations here. Let's go get our tag name. I like to keep things organized. So again, I'm putting it in a GA4 folder, even though I don't have any other folders right now. Let's create our tag. It's a GA4 element. I don't have to remember the crazy measurement ID. It's a constant variable. And now it's pretty much copy paste time if you've got it all written down in advance. If you don't, if you're kind of going off on the fly, it's actually kind of hard and difficult, and it's very error prone, right? So I think we've got 4 parameters here. Page headline is 1 parameter. We've also got species, and then we've got pet name and pet ID, I think is what we did. So this is easy. This is just page headline. And so you all know this is the page headline is just gonna grab the H1 tag from, or the page title from the page, so we know what page they're on. That's kind of redundant, but I do it anyway just for consistency. Species is just our JS pet species. And again, I've written these already, so it's gonna grab these for us. I won't go into the gory detail about how to gather these just now, but just suffice to say that all of these variables that you see in this document are all documented down below, right? So this is going to grab, it's going to be some element right here that's going to scrape the pet ID for what was her name? Delilah in this case. I already forgot her name. That's terrible. Okay. So I think this is it. Oh, let's add our trigger. Adopt pet details. There she is. And let's give this a shot. Cross your fingers, say a little prayer. We're going to hit preview. It's going to take us to the home page, but then we'll navigate over. It's going to think a little bit, but that's okay. And now we'll go to adopt. And now it's time. And this is going to load. Let's look at a cat this time. And Woody. Okay, so now this card is loaded. We should have seen some event fire from an element visibility trigger that's going to gather Woody as a pet name, 545 something something as the ID, and then cat as the species. Let's see if it worked. Yes, we do see an element visibility trigger. Adopt pet details. There she is. Let's open up this tag. And we are on Pets for Adoption. It was a cat. It's Woody. And there's the ID. It ends in 6161. Sure does. Okay, great. We got that to work. Let's do another one. Let's get something else. What's other? Okay. Dr. Spock, you're coming home with me. All right, here we go. Let's see if this worked. And again, because we can do this, the trigger on this one, remember, is once per element. If I did it once per page, it would only fire on Woody, and that'd be it. Like, we wouldn't be able to track Dr. Spock in this case, but because it's once per element, it'll track for every single time a modal appears, which is what we want, right? So let's check this out. Dr. Spock, and it's a reptile. Look at that. All right. So there we go. There's some advanced triggers for you. Hope you had fun. While I'm here, let's publish these things. So we're going to go GA4 Advanced Tags Tutorial. Fun times. There we go. Publish. And now those are live. We're making them live because we tested them. We know they work. We feel confident in them. And there you go. Hey, if you found this helpful, you'd be doing me a huge favor if you consider donating to Maui Humane Society. The need is always great, and they would be much appreciated. If you've got any questions, you can contact me at any point. Thank you very much for your attention. We'll see you in the next video.